I feel very humbled to be up here because I know so many people in this room could be up here as well, honoring this person in our lives and in our state. And so I'm going to do the best I can to do it justice. Tonight, I'm very grateful to honor one of my heroes, our founder, and a trailblazer in the environmental movement. There is so much to say and so many achievements, and if you haven't seen the board in the back, it's just an amazing piece of history. Sally Rodgers created a political voice for the environment at the Central Clearinghouse that later became Conservation Voters New Mexico. She served as its director and organized Santa Fe's first Earth Day in 1970. Her co-founder of the Central Clearinghouse, Harvey Mudd, said in a letter to David Brower, "She is quite frankly one of the best active environmentalists I have ever known, and one of the most dedicated." She became New Mexico's first woman lobbyist, advocating for environmental issues in the state legislature. She served as an environmental policy aide for Governor Anaya, and later an environmental appointee by 4 more governors. Referred to by her colleagues as Mother Green, Sally's keen knowledge and strategic mind made a difference in battles on the environmental protection front for decades. She worked on so many critical issues, including limiting the amount of nuclear waste that gets stored at WIPP, securing protection for the Bisti Badlands and Otero Mesa, preventing the Rio Grande from being channeled, fighting mining abuses that caused harm to northern New Mexico communities. But this might be my favorite. She is famously known for bringing a mountain lion to a committee hearing at the state legislature. With a 100-pound cat, a room full of students and media, she won. She won a debate to upgrade the status of mountain lions to a game animal so that they could be protected during breeding season. But Sally's accomplishments cannot be measured by policy alone. She has dedicated her life to mentoring a new generation of activists working for environmental protections and human rights. I met Sally in 2013, shortly after joining CVNM, and I'd heard so much about her, I was nervous. I was really nervous. But you see Sally across the room, and the minute I caught her eyes, I felt this warmth and strength that was so welcoming. And she walked up to me and said, "I'm the grandmother of CVNM." She asked to take a photo with me and Sandy Buffett. And she referred to the women who had been leaders since her time at the beginning of CVNM as the daughters and the granddaughters. I knew in that moment I was somewhere special and significant. She has always been our historian, our mentor, and our ally. And when we call her, she still rolls up her sleeves and gets to work. Personally, when I have met challenges in my work, all I needed to do was call Sally, and she would offer me words of support, and if I got really lucky, a story. And usually these stories gave me a new perspective from her deep well of experience and a suggested path to move forward. Thank you, Sally. Sally planted the seeds of our organization nearly 50 years ago. And with her nurturing support, our roots continue to anchor themselves deeply in the rich New Mexico soil. And thankfully today, she continues to be our teacher, our mentor, our ally for all the daughters, granddaughters, sons, and grandsons who will be the future conservation leaders in our state and who will advocate for our air, our land, our water, our wildlife, and our people. Thank you, Sally.
I also was nervous the first time I met you. I think you and Linda summoned me to the Z8 diner in about 2005, and I felt like I was, under the spotlight. But I soon learned you were the doyen of all things legislative advocacy and to listen to you. And then I learned the art of the movida from Sally. And that was the movida for good, for using those powers on the side of air, land, and water, and how powerful it's been. I also learned about what the legislature was like and lobbying before cell phones, when they actually carried giant bags of dimes in their pockets to lobby. Can you imagine? Sally, you taught me everything I know about the Roundhouse. I can't think of a single major bill that we were involved in, either fighting or seeking to pass, that you weren't either overtly out there or that had your fingerprints on. So thank you. You were always advising us on strategy, whether it was stopping a coal plant, defeating sprawl developers, or ending state contracts that were killing cougars. So when we look around our state and the things we love most, you've always been there protecting it. So I think the thread from you in the 70s during the Anaya years to the CVNM of today leads directly back to your vision. So great. It's so great to be honoring you tonight. And let's all just clap for Sally.
Our first ever Sally Rodgers Lifetime Achievement Award. Sally, I want to read this platter. It says, in recognition of her lifelong leadership advocating on behalf of New Mexico's air, land, water, and communities, blazing the trail for New Mexico's environmental movement, and mentoring the next generation of environmental advocates and leaders. Thank you, Sally. We'd also like to present you with this beautiful painting of our landscape in New Mexico, painted by Gary Oakley, who's here tonight.
I can't talk and cry at the same time, right? I am deeply humbled by this never-imagined honor and so grateful to be in this beautiful place with all of you, my fellow Druids. I'll explain Druidness in a minute. And I'll tell you about the Central Clearinghouse building blocks that are the foundations of CVNM. I also brought you organic apples from trees I planted. And I'll tell you a story about apples, not the grocery store pesticide sprayed kind. In this celebration of leadership, I first want to thank the leaders who made it possible for me to stand on their shoulders. I had no mentors, but I did get good advice from leaders of their time. Advice that served me well then and still does. Today, I pass it on to you. And I'll time travel a bit from those yesteryears and what we had back then and what we didn't and what that means for today and tomorrow. I also want to thank the people who were an indispensable part of the clearinghouse Clearinghouse and what it accomplished. 4 of them are with us tonight. Scientist Mike Williams, who with John Bartlett brought us the essential necessary science, now there's a concept, that literally made it possible for us to do what we did in stopping the Kaiparowitz coal-fired power plant. Tom Noble, board member of the Clearinghouse and Conservation Voters Alliance, and attorney Grove Burnett, for bringing keen legal skills to our battle, and Professor Denise Fort for her contributions as a Clearinghouse volunteer. Though not with us tonight, I thank the Native Americans and the Hispanic people of northern New Mexico who were the first to raise alarms about burning coal in our then pristine air. All good work is always a good team's work. In 1968, the first life-changing advice I got was from Shirley Radel, the director of Zero Population Growth, now Population Connection. The old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear was true for me that year. One evening, while nursing my baby Rachel, who, by the way, is over there behind a camera, I was watching the biologist Paul Ehrlich talk about his book on TV. Dots started getting connected in my head. After I read his book and all the books in the bibliography, I organized the first ZBG chapter in New Mexico, and I called Shirley Radel for advice. All she said was, "Be Olympian." Wait a minute. I'm hardly a goddess. What does she mean I should do? I have pondered that advice many times over the past 50 years and always find new meaning in it exactly when I need it. What she meant was to take the highest of high roads, to look at the 360-degree landscape from my own Mount Olympus so I could see the big picture, to stand in a place where I could see where the problems were, as well as where it is possible to stand on common ground with an adversary. And, as important, see the quicksand so I don't fall in it. The second was from Clearinghouse board member Bill Lumpkins, a solar energy pioneer. Bill advised me I would be judged for the enemies I made. And he emphasized I should regard those enemies as badges of honor. I did and still do. I have come to understand that those enemies, those abusers of power, those deniers of climate change, racism, misogyny, and inequality consort with the vampires of greed and privilege. Vampires who, with their dark money Citizen United fangs, seek to drain the lifeblood from our democracy. One of them has lived on the 4th floor of the state capitol for 8 years. Too many in D.C. have life-draining power, but we will send the torches of truth to defeat them with Deb, Sochi, Ben Ray, and Martin. I also want to thank Harvey Mudd, architect of the pioneering work of the Clearinghouse. Harvey gave me more than advice. He didn't prescribe my work. He was the Nike sloganeer of that time when he said, in essence, just go do it. Few women in those days were given that kind of acceptance, encouragement, and support. I got a few headaches cracking my head on the glass ceiling during those years. Today, there's more than cracks in the glass.
Yeah. Yes.
Today, we can actually feel some sunlight coming through, but the ceiling is still there. Until that glass ceiling is gone, no one will ever say the first in front of any woman running for office, whether it be the first woman nominated to be president, or the first black woman in Congress, or the first trans woman elected to a state legislature, or the first Muslim woman elected to Congress, indeed until and unless the first as a description isn't used anymore, we have work to do. Until all women, all people of color running for office are as commonplace as old white men running for office, we have work to do. Until the ceilings of bigotry and hatred that repress and abuse poor people, people of color, any religion, any gender, any country of origin, until all can breathe the pure, clean air of truth and equality, until all can reach for the stars with no barriers in the way, we have work to do. Until the fundamental standard of running for public office is the call to public service, not personal profit, we have work to do. In New Mexico, we could lead the nation by example when Michelle Lujan Grisham is governor, because she'll sign the good environmental social justice bills that Speaker Egolf and Leader Worth send up to her. Let me take a couple of minutes to tell you about some of the Clearinghouse building blocks. We waged educational media campaigns in New Mexico and nationally. Stories of our work were published in Time and Newsweek, prompting the New York Attorney General to initiate investigations of illegal, unethical business land sale practices in New Mexico. We established a speakers bureau with outreach to community organizations across the state. We published weekly reports on environment and social bills when the legislature was in session. A foundational building block was scoring legislators on their votes and holding them accountable. We supported our champions in their elections and opposed those who weren't. Examples are on the board over there. We nurtured and supported existing environmental organizations, blocks that became Environmental Alliance of New Mexico. We created the Santa Fe Federation to oppose unplanned growth. We created ways for citizen participation in the legislative and regulatory processes. We taught effective lobby skills. In 1970, we organized hundreds of people to fill the rotunda and the third floor balcony to hear then Governor King read a proclamation about the first Citizens Lobby Day. Clearinghouse building blocks became the foundation of Conservation Voters Alliance. CVA continued to be a coordinating umbrella for every environmental organization in the state with active outreach to social justice groups. Many boards could be filled with CVA accomplishments. The Clearinghouse was decades away from today's technologies. There were no computers, no internet, no smartphones, no social media, no texting. Not having that, we created a physical library that was open to the public every day and maintained by volunteers. Try and imagine working in those technological horse and buggy days in the 4-story round building without a smartphone, where to make a phone call you had to stand in a long line at a payphone in the hall. No privacy, no texting in committees. But I was blessed with strong legs to climb flights of stairs pretty much continuously in high heels and get by with a few hours sleep, if no all-nighters. The building block I am most proud of was, in 1971, bringing language to amend the New Mexico Constitution to 2 senators, 1 Democrat and 1 Republican, and lobbying my heart out to help them pass it. Senate Democrats and Republicans voted unanimously to pass the amendment. The vote in the House was not unanimous, but it passed with both Democrat and Republican votes. What became Article 20, Section 21 of the New Mexico Constitution is a building block that can be used to create standards for environmental protection, restoration, and environmental justice. Standards that could become models for other states. Sadly, we know restoration is necessary. We know when explosives are planted in key places in a building, it's brought down in mere minutes. We've seen that play out too often in our environment. It's happening now. It's so easy to destroy, so much harder to create, and too often impossible to replace that which has been destroyed. The protection of the state's beautiful and healthful environment is hereby declared to be of fundamental importance to the public interest, health, safety, and general welfare. The legislature shall provide for control of pollution and control of despoilment of air, water, and other natural resources of this state, consistent with the use and development of those resources for the maximum benefit of the people. This constitutional amendment embodies hope for our future, but it also illustrates something we've lost and need to restore, in addition to the repairs of damage done to our people's health, air, water, land, and wildlife in the past 8 years. Common, good bipartisanship. Now, here's the story about why we're Druids and why apples, Mount Olympus, and finding common ground are all connected. In 1978, when the Clearinghouse closed its doors, none of us wanted its building blocks to crumble. Harvey Mudd kindly recommended me to David Brower, then the leader of the organization he founded, Friends of the Earth. Brower, who is generally considered to be the father of the modern environmental movement, was the director of the Sierra Club and was instrumental in helping Mary and Eddie found the League of Conservation Voters. He would later found Earth Island Institute and be nominated 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. Brower came to Santa Fe to interview me. It was a thorough interview, one that lasted several days, while he stayed with his wife at my home. A developer who opposed Brower's effort to create a park attacked him by saying environmentalists were all Druids because they worship trees and sacrifice people. The developer clearly didn't know anything about photosynthesis, or there wouldn't be enough oxygen for people to breathe without trees. Brower became known as the Archdruid and used that title proudly to educate. Brower was also passionate about apples, saying, "You are villains not to share your apples with worms. Bite the worm. They won't hurt you nearly as much as insecticide does." David Brower never met State Senator Aubrey Dunn Sr., but had they met, they would have found common ground talking about organic apples, as I did with Aubrey. He, too, was passionate about sharing the apples in his orchard with worms. Being able to stand on the common ground of a love for organic apples made it possible for me to talk to him about rivers, specifically the Rio Grande, that the state engineer in his budget request wanted to channelize in line with concrete. The state engineer didn't hug trees. Aubrey was chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Though there were few things Aubrey and I agreed on, when we stood together on common ground, the state engineer didn't get appropriations to channel the Rio. And Aubrey saw that the language preventing him from trying it again would continue beyond that session. So, my fellow Druids, take an organic apple, mine or any other, to the top of your own Mount Olympus. Look for common ground, find the quicksand, then take a moment to breathe in the beauty of this earth, the only one we will ever know. While you're there, hug a tree. But before you go, take a moment to hug the druid next to you and thank them, as I do, for adding their own unique dot of color to the metaphorical, pointillist big picture of what we do together. I leave you now with a favorite quote. What you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Wow.